In the summer of 1864, the dollar teetered on the edge of oblivion, and few Americans noticed. The United States Treasury, led by Salmon P. Chase, had printed currency at an unprecedented rate to fund a war that seemed endless. The so-called greenbacks were meant to be temporary, a bridge over the chaos of the Civil War. Yet with every shipment of notes, confidence in the dollar weakened, and whispers spread that the nation's currency could become worthless overnight. On the streets of New York and Chicago, merchants demanded gold instead of paper, and farmers discovered that prices for bread and tools could change from morning to night. The system, the very foundation of trust in the dollar, was cracking under the strain of necessity, greed, and political expediency. At the heart of the crisis were bankers and speculators, some profiting quietly, others panicking openly, while ordinary citizens faced the real cost of hyperinflation. The government tried to reassure the public, yet every announcement seemed to stretch the truth thinner than the notes themselves. Beneath the booming rhetoric of victory and progress, a silent storm was brewing, one that could erase fortunes, savings, and faith in the American experiment itself. By late 1864, cracks were showing in the greenback's fragile facade. Merchants in Boston whispered that prices seemed to change daily, and farmers grumbled that a bushel of wheat now cost twice what it had months ago. Treasury reports boasted stability, yet internal ledgers told a different story, debt piling up faster than Congress could approve, and temporary measures extending indefinitely. Speculators noticed early. They bought gold and foreign bonds, leaving ordinary citizens with paper that was slowly losing value. Rumors of insider trading and secret profiteering swirled in Washington's corridors, officials allegedly exchanging government bonds for gold at the expense of public trust. Some bankers laughed, calling it wartime necessity, while others whispered warnings, only to be silenced or ignored. Even the printing presses seemed complicit, churning out notes faster than anyone could count. And as the population clutched their greenbacks tighter, confidence began to wobble. The dollar's strength had always been faith, not metal. And now, with every new note flooding the streets, that faith was thinning. History was beginning to repeat itself, quietly but relentlessly. And when trust dies, even a mighty currency can collapse overnight. The betrayal didn't come from abroad. It came from within. In December 1864, an investigative journalist, Clara Barton, better known for her work on the front lines, stumbled upon a series of treasury ledgers revealing massive mismanagement and secret profiteering. Certain officials had been quietly exchanging greenbacks for gold at inflated rates, enriching themselves while the dollar's value plummeted. Government-issued reports celebrated stability, yet real markets were collapsing in plain sight. Farmers, laborers, and merchants faced ruin. A loaf of bread cost twice as much as the week before. Wages lagged behind inflation. Pensions promised in dollars were suddenly worth a fraction of their face value. Banks struggled to honor withdrawals, and everyday Americans lost faith in the currency that was supposed to bind a nation together. The core crime was clear: political collusion and exploitation of war finances to enrich a select few, while ordinary citizens bore the brunt of economic collapse. Clara's exposé lit the powder keg. Newspapers spread the revelation across states. Debates in Congress grew heated. Riots flared in major cities. But the question lingered like smoke over the Capitol. Could the perpetrators be held accountable, or would the dollar continue its silent descent into worthlessness? Clara Barton realized that exposing the ledgers was only the first step. The real fight was for the soul of the dollar itself. She began collecting first-hand accounts from merchants, farmers, and soldiers, creating a mosaic of economic collapse that no official could deny. Each story of ruined livelihoods, unpaid wages, and soaring prices became evidence of systemic betrayal. Meanwhile, she traced the gold transfers, connecting them directly to Treasury officials who had manipulated the currency for personal gain. It became painfully clear the problem wasn't just war or debt. It was human ego and greed embedded in the very machinery of the government. Leaders had chosen short-term power over the long-term stability of a nation. Every note printed without integrity was a nail in the coffin of trust. Clara reached out to a network of reform-minded politicians and bankers who had quietly resisted corruption. Together, they devised a plan to publicly confront the perpetrators and restore transparency to the financial system. For the first time in months, a spark of hope appeared. A chance to reverse the tide before the dollar's collapse became irreversible. Justice was no longer theoretical. It was about to be calculated, deliberate, and unstoppable. Clara Barton knew the battle for the dollar wasn't fought with swords, but with proof. She meticulously traced the flow of greenbacks and gold, following the money from federal vaults to private hands. Each transaction exposed a hidden network of profiteers, treasury officials, war contractors, and speculators who had quietly enriched themselves while ordinary Americans suffered. With every link uncovered, the scope of the betrayal became undeniable. But Clara didn't stop there. She leaked critical documents to sympathetic newspapers and reform-minded congressmen, ensuring the truth would reach both the public and those in power. Each leak caused murmurs of outrage, but the perpetrators remained confident, believing their positions and influence shielded them from consequences. At the same time, Clara began building a rival financial coalition, a network of trustworthy bankers and merchants who would stabilize trade, guarantee fair exchange rates, and restore confidence once the corrupt officials were exposed. The city buzzed with tension. Markets were jittery, rumors of corruption spread like wildfire, and citizens began questioning the dollar's value in every transaction. Justice was no longer distant. It was a looming inevitability. But the final strike had yet to land. The day of reckoning arrived in the House of Representatives, where Clara Barton presented her meticulously gathered evidence. Scrolls of treasury ledgers, sworn statements from merchants and soldiers, and gold transfer records lay before Congress like a ledger of betrayal. "Here is the truth," she declared, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "The dollar has been manipulated, the people defrauded, and public trust sold to the highest bidder." The chamber erupted. Senators who had turned a blind eye could no longer deny the facts. Newspapers printed her findings in bold headlines. Treasury officials enriched themselves, dollar in peril. Panic rippled through markets as merchants demanded gold instead of greenbacks, and citizens lined up at banks to secure what little real value remained. Treasury officials scrambled to defend themselves, but the evidence was irrefutable. Some resigned in disgrace, others faced criminal charges. Even war contractors implicated in profiteering were dragged into the spotlight. For the first time in months, confidence began to stabilize, not because the currency was flawless, but because justice had been seen to act. The dollar had teetered on the brink of collapse, but thanks to Clara's courage, the nation glimpsed a path back from ruin. By 1865, the crisis had passed, but its scars remained. Treasury officials who had enriched themselves were disgraced, some imprisoned, others quietly stripped of power. The dollar, battered and mistrusted, began its slow recovery, propped up by reforms and the brave actions of those who refused to remain silent. Clara Barton, though celebrated, faded from the headlines, content with the quiet victory of having preserved a nation's faith in its currency. The market stabilized, yet the lesson lingered. When greed intertwines with governance, even the mightiest economy can crumble. Centuries later, historians would look back at those greenbacks, worn and fragile, as reminders that money is only as strong as the trust behind it. Paper can be printed, coins can be minted, but deceit erodes value far faster than inflation ever could. And in that truth lies poetic justice. The dollar survived not because of power, but because courage weighed heavier than gold. Speech balloon, do you think greed always gets caught? Or does it merely wear a new disguise? Backhand index pointing down, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe, and stay tuned for more forgotten financial betrayals that shaped the world. Scroll, because in finance, as in life, trust is the currency that never loses value.